As Ed said, we are going to explore today the third fragment in The Voice of the Silence, which is the last one. As we said, there is not necessarily a continuity between these fragments, but the opening paragraph kind of ties it to the previous one. In the previous fragment, we have seen an exposition about these two paths. The open path, which is like the exoteric path, the path of spiritual evolution with the aim of attaining personal liberation, and the secret path, which is the path of compassion, which involves the effort to realize truth, not to gain liberation, but to be able to help others to realize truth also. So the opening paragraph in The Voice of the Silence in this fragment, the disciple says to the teacher, "The choice is made. I thirst for wisdom. Now hast thou rent the veil before the secret path. Thy servant here is ready for thy guidance." So the teacher answers, "It is well, Shravaka." Shravaka means the student, the listener, the person that is learning but not necessarily active in the spiritual life at the level of working on the transformation of consciousness. We all practice a spiritual life, but from this point of view, we all are Shravaka. We are still learning about the spiritual life. So the teacher says, "It is well, Shravaka, prepare thyself, for thou wilt have to travel alone. The teacher can but point the way." And this is the first concept that is important to understand, because in the theosophical view, there are these masters of wisdom that we have been mentioning, and we had a series about this previously in Living Theosophy. But the idea is that these adepts, these masters, are not teachers in the way that we usually think of in the West. We think of a teacher as a person that is there constantly explaining things to the disciple or the student, telling him what to do, what not to do, like a tutor in that way. The spiritual life is an experience that we have to face it alone. I mean, we may be surrounded by people, we may be supported by people, we may have some advice, but ultimately speaking, when we have a problem, it is us that have to solve it. Many people may say what we should do, but finally we have to come to a decision. And if we take a decision only based on what somebody says, many times that doesn't work. Or when we are in suffering, we are suffering no matter how much people around can help us or support us. Of course, that makes a little difference, but basically, we have to face a spiritual life by ourselves. So the idea of these masters is that when a master contacts a student, a disciple, that disciple may not hear about the master anymore for years, because the difference is that now the disciple, the things that happen in life to this disciple are like karmically arranged for the disciple to learn. And he needs to learn by himself. So he will go on with his normal life, but now he has to face life from a different point of view. He cannot react with aggression when he is suffering aggression, for example. I mean, he can, but the idea is that now there is a completely different approach to life, where the rules are very clear and very easy, and we all know the rules. You know, if you read any teaching in any serious religion, the rules are clear. You know, you cannot return hate to hate. You have to develop a calm mind, a pure heart. You know, we know all those things. But they are easy to say and difficult to practice. The idea is that the person who is in what in theosophy is called the path, the person who enters the path, is committing to himself mainly to live in a different way. This whole teaching about the path is complex, and I cannot go into it too much. But this fragment talks about the entering the path. Remember that we said previously that we talked a little about the concept of initiations. The word initiation is used in many different ways. In Hinduism, in Freemasonry, in common parlance, you know, in each tradition they use it in a particular way. In the theosophical sense, initiation is something kind of artificial, if we want to say it in that way, where a person that is ready to go through an accelerated course of spiritual evolution is contacted by these bodhisattvas, as they are called in the Voice of the Silence, that is in a Buddhist context. And this person may undergo an initiation where his consciousness is expanded artificially, as I said, in the sense of by means of the powers of the masters, so that he sees life from a higher perspective. But then that person comes back to his own natural perception, and the whole work is to live life based on that perception and trying to make that perception stable, make that perception his own perception. Now, all this involves the stirring up of what Jung would call the shadow in ourselves. So there is the path of regular, normal, religious, spiritual development where the person naturally matures gradually, and there is this other path of initiation where the person goes through a series of experiences that are not the normal, regular way of developing. So when a person in this path acquires a perception, that person may lose that perception. In the regular path, when we get to a certain point, that point is very stable because we got there with all our nature growing together gradually. So when a person, for example, perceives the unity of things through the regular path, that perception is there stable. Now, when a person perceives the unity of things through the process of initiation, that person may lose that perception, and even that person may may break down psychologically because it's a lot of pressure that person is having. Just like if we are going accelerated through any kind of study. You know, when you study something and you don't have enough time to mature it, you may have a lot of information, but you don't know how to connect it, so it's something that is not easy. If you can go through all that and you can learn in that accelerated way, then you can get to the same point that a person was going through the regular course, but faster. And why faster? In this context, again, because humanity needs help, and those who say, I'm willing to help, then they may have the opportunity to go through the last steps of their spiritual evolution faster so that they can help. Now, this saying, I want to help, is not something that we can say with our minds. We say, I want to help through lives of service to humanity, actual service with whatever power we have. How are we spending our time? Are we spending most of our time only in a state of self-gratification, just to enjoy life? How are we spending or using our money? Are we using all our money just also as a source of self-gratification? Or our intelligence? We are intelligent. Are we using that intelligence to be, successful in the world and have a great position? Or are we using that intelligence also to help others? One thing doesn't necessarily deny the other. I don't mean that a person shouldn't have a career. But this is a question, with the powers we already have, how do we use, each one of us, our powers in our lives? So through a life where the person is giving whatever that person has for the service of humanity, that person is saying, out of compassion, out of love, I'm willing to help humanity. And when that person is mature enough to enter the path, which is something rare, it is said that once the person enters the path, there are only 7 lives left until that person, that's the average, until that person reaches nirvana, which is a very short period, although in modern Western spirituality, to talk about 7 lives to enlightenment seems to be a huge period, because many people think that they can get enlightenment in this very life, and maybe some can, but there is also a question of a lack of awareness of what enlightenment means. But from the theosophical point of view, we have been evolving for billions of years, not only on this earth, so 7 lives is nothing. So the idea is that a soul enters the path when that soul is very close to the last stages of evolution. And if that soul is willing to undergo this path faster to help humanity. So once an adept contacts the disciple, that disciple is not being constantly told what to do or what not to do. On the contrary, now the disciple has to learn how to rely on his own discernment, how to develop his own intelligence, discernment. So if he had a person constantly telling him what to do, then there is no opportunity for any development. So this is why, prepare thyself, for thou will have to travel alone. So then there is a question, the master asks the disciple which path he will choose. Will he choose the path of meditation in isolation to gain the personal liberation, or to thread the path of the paramitas? Paramitas is a Buddhist concept. These are 6 virtues that a spiritual person has. So to practice the paramitas, there are 6 or 10 according to the level. 10 for monks, 6 for laymen or women. So the idea is that the path of the paramitas, the development of these virtues, are the symbol for the path of developing our nature to help humanity in the voice of the silence. So the teacher says, are you going to choose the path of meditation in isolation or the path of the paramitas? And the teacher says, the path of meditation is difficult, and thrice great is he who climbs the lofty top. But the paramita heights are crossed by a still steeper path. Thou hast to fight thy way through 7 portals, 7 strongholds held by cruel, crafty powers, the passions incarnate. Remember that in this path, the passions or the shadow or all that the ignorance that is in us is stirred up so that we can work with that. So it says, be of good cheer, disciple. Bear in mind the golden rule. Once thou hast passed the gate of Srotapati, which is the first initiation when the person enters the path, thou hast but 7 lives before thee. Which means, as you are going to see, why does the master says, be of good cheer, disciple? Because these 7 lives are going to be difficult lives. Lives with a lot of work, a lot of challenges. So the master says, but be of good cheer, it is only 7 lives. If, again, a disciple at this point has a view of the whole, or a wider view where he can see that 7 lives is like saying, okay, I will work a lot this year because after I work this year, even if it is very difficult, then in the future I can do whatever, So we can see, if we see our whole life, we can see that 1 year is not much, that we can do an extra effort. In this sense also, a disciple sees that 7 lives are not so much and that he or she can do this effort. So the voice of the silence in this fragment talks basically about what happens since a person gets the first initiation and enters the path. But there is a warning, and it says, because as we said, there is a level of maturity, spiritual maturity, that is needed to be able to enter the path. So it says, before thou wert made fit to meet thy teacher face to face, what wert thou told? Before thou can approach the gate, thou hast to learn to separate that body from that mind, to dissipate the shadow, and to live in the eternal. For this, thou hast to live and breathe in all, as all that thou perceivest breatheth in thee, to feel thyself abiding in all things, and all things in self. So the idea is that a person is ready to enter the path after this person has attained a pretty deep perception of unity. All our work before entering the path is to get rid of the sense of selfishness, of the illusion that we are this personality. This is why when we say the theosophical approach to the spiritual life, the whole emphasis is in realizing that we are not the personality, that we are not this body, emotions, and mind, or we are not only this, that the real self is beyond this, and the real self is one with everything. Because that's the preparation for the path. That's the aim of the theosophical spirituality, to take the person to that point where that person can perceive the unity of life to a certain extent. Of course, that perception of unity can go deeper and deeper. But it is only when that person perceives the unity of life to a certain extent that a master can present himself. And of course, a person that perceives the unity of life is devoid to a large extent of any personal ambition. So nobody would be ambitious about trying to attract the attention of the master for any worldly or personal ambition, So for a mature person, there is not this thing of personal ambition to get in touch with the masters. That's, in the theosophical view, is a very sacred subject where the person, the aspirant, is not very much concerned with. The aspirant is trying to realize truth, to be of help to humanity in whatever way, and if the master contacts him or her, then that's part of the process, but it's not an object of our ambition. So the description in the Voice of the Silence is that this path has 7 portals, and each one of the portals has a key. That key is the one that is the quality that has to be acquired to go through that portal to the next stage. And these keys are the 6 paramitas in Buddhism, plus 1 quality that the Voice of the Silence adds. The first key is, in Sanskrit, is called Dana, D-A-N-A. And it is described as the key of charity and love immortal. Because the first experience that a person has during initiation is a deeper realization of this unity of life. The person had been made able to perceive the unity of life by his or her own efforts, and has a perception to a certain extent. During the initiation, his consciousness is raised to what we call buddhi in theosophy, and there is a deeper perception of the unity of life. The person really feels being everywhere in everything. But now the person goes back to his own state of consciousness and has to, as I said, make that perception stable, to gain that perception as his own, not as something that happened during the initiation. And of course, when the person comes out of that experience, he's full of a sense of love and charity and compassion. And for a while, that's a major quality of his state of consciousness. So the description of this first portal says, armed with the key of charity, of love and tender mercy, thou art secure before the gate of Dana, this quality, the gate that standeth at the entrance of the path. Behold, O happy pilgrim, the portal that faceth thee is high and wide, seems easy of access. The road that leads therethrough is straight and smooth and green. There, birds of hope sing chanting success to fearless pilgrims. Pass on, for thou hast brought the key, thou art secure. So this first stage in the path is a stage that is marked by this sense of love and unity, because it comes out after this experience of the unity of life. But since we said this is not a state of consciousness that was gained naturally by the person, that state will fade away. Not completely, of course, because that person was already at a level of certain perception of life. But it's, after all, a personal emotion. And personal emotions are impermanent. So, after a while, comes a second stage in the path, a stage where the karma begins to be accelerated so that all the roots of ignorance can be seen and worked on and realize the illusion of, that was the source of that particular tendency or obstacle for the perception of truth. So the second portal, the key to the second portal is Shila, S-H-I-L-A, and is described in the Voice of the Silence as the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and the effect, and leaves no further room for karmic action. Now come to the life of the disciple many challenging situations that will bring forth his own weaknesses or doubts or incapacities, and this person has to, by going through these experiences, has to mature all these aspects of himself. So the voice of the silence says, to the second gate, the way is verdant too, but it is steep and winds uphill. Yet, to its rocky top. Gray mists will overhang its rough and stony height, and all be dark beyond. As one goes on, the song of hope soundeth more feeble in the pilgrim's heart. The thrill of doubt is now upon him. His step less steady grows. Beware of this, O candidate. Beware of fear that spreadeth like the black and soundless wings of the midnight bat. Fear, disciple, kills the will and stays all action. If lacking in the Sheila virtue, the harmony in word and action, the pilgrim trips and karmic pebbles bruise his feet along the rocky path. This succession of things is normal in our lives. When we come for the first time to the Theosophical Society, for example, or when we find a philosophy that we feel at home, that we deeply feel at heart, we have this joyous sense. We have this sense of a new vision of the world. And everything is good. But then the challenges come. When we are serious about the spiritual life, we naturally attract opportunities to grow. And many people, when life begins to be difficult, are scared. And they say, I thought that by being spiritual, everything was going to be easier. I thought that nothing was going to happen. And on the contrary, now it seems I say, I don't want to do this, I'm going to work on this. And it seems like the situations are there one after the other, challenging me in that very aspect. And I have seen many times how people, when they encounter these difficulties, they recede. They stop making an effort. Because they thought that some of them think that by treading the spiritual path, they were going to be happier or have more pleasure. Yeah, the end of the path is one of happiness and peace, but to get there, we have to get rid of the illusion, which means we have to go through a kind of disillusionment, and that for most people is painful, to let go of our mistakes, of our old habits, of our wrong needs. So this happens at different levels, that after this first stage of enthusiasm comes a stage where we begin to face the difficulties, and that enthusiasm fades away unless we are really sincere and clear about what was ahead. In fact, the idea of writing these things, you will see that these things are written especially to warn about the pitfalls of the path. In fact, it is said in one of the verses, it is said, before you enter the path, let me tell you about the pitfalls that you will encounter. Usually in the spiritual traditions, in the ancient spiritual traditions, they will tell you, or they will give you a pretty dark view of spirituality. And many gurus will make it even worse than it will be for several reasons. First, to see if you are sincere about that. They are not interested in selling spirituality, in marketing and making it look nicer so you can buy it. You know all these stories of a disciple that knocks at the door of the temple and he's left outside for 3 days to see if he's really earnest to get into the temple. Or even in Karate Kid, that movie that he has to go through a lot of hardships, and that was part of his training, even if he didn't know. But all these things are part of the tradition. A guru will try to repel the aspirant and see if the aspirant is really sincere. It is only in our Western view of spirituality that is mixed a lot with business, and that we consider success as how many people come, how much you can sell. So we enter in this marketing of spirituality. But the idea of showing the dark aspect, the difficult aspect of spirituality, is to test if you are really interested, if you are really mature, and also for you to be warned, because we don't complain about the happy things, the happy side. When the happy side of spirituality comes, we are okay with that. We complain about the other side. So let us know how the path is going to be. And then, of course, comes all the inspiration and the full sense of life and reality that comes with the spiritual path. But along with that will come the difficulties. And the master would say, nobody told you it was going to be easy. But it's worth doing. It's, as we said in one of the first talks, when you are a teenager and you are becoming an adult, you cannot do anything but becoming an adult if you are mature. Not because the life of an adult will be easier, but because that's what you are. That's your natural stage. So the idea is that at this point, the disciple has to learn, has to develop this discernment to know what the right action is. This is why karma is very, very much associated with this stage. There are challenges, there are difficult situations, and the disciple has to decide what the right action is from the deepest perspective, not according to the moral code of society, that many times is fake. Some of the things, in our morality are good, some others are just part of our culture. And for a spiritual person, what matters is what the person is really intending to do, not only what the person does. For example, a normal person would not steal, not because he's free from the need to or the desire to acquire things for himself, but he won't steal because he doesn't want the punishment. But if he finds something and nobody's around, he may take it. Now, for a spiritual person, it doesn't matter that this person, or it's not enough that the person doesn't do something. What is needed is that the person doesn't have not even the tendency, the thought, the intention to do something that is wrong. So all this stage is a difficult stage where the person really learns to discern the truth from the false, the right from the wrong, the desires from the right view. And when the person commits a mistake, since this person is in this accelerated course, the karmic results come right away. Usually normal people, the karmic results are held many times for even several lives because that person is not mature enough to receive, if a person is ignorant and does a lot of wrong things, if that person would get the karmic result of every single thing that he or she does wrong, probably life would crush the person. So nature holds the results of karma for a while until the soul is stronger, and the karmic results can be a lesson and not a punishment. A lesson and not something that will, or something that will help the growth and not something that will stop it. But at this point, the disciple, usually karma works right away because the disciple has to learn. He said, I want to learn. So this is why at this point it's important to learn this harmony in word and action. It's a way to say, to learn how to do the right action. Then the next portal is, the key is Kshanti, 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 which is defined in the Voice of the Silence as patience sweet that naught can ruffle. And it says, Be of sure thought, O candidate. In Shanti essence bathe thy soul, for now thou dost approach the portal of that name, the gate of fortitude and patience. The more thou dost advance, the more thy feet pitfalls will meet. The path that leadeth on is lighted by one fire, the light of daring, burning in the heart. The more one dares, the more he shall obtain. The more he fears, the more that light shall pale. And that alone can guide. No light shines from the Spirit that shines from the Spirit can dispel the darkness of the soul, unless all selfish thought has been destroyed. For now, the last great fight, the final war between the higher and the lower self, hath taken place. But once that thou hast passed the gate of Shanti, the third step is taken, and thy body is thy slave. So the idea here is that this is, if you see the first key, Dana, which has to do with charity and love, could be related in a sense to our physical nature, to our actions. How do we act in the sense of, act with love and charity, out of this spiritual perception, of course. But the second key, Shila, the harmony in word and act, could be related to how we feel. Because the source of this harmony is many times emotional, it's not mental. We all know what we should do, but it is our emotions that don't let us do what we want to, or we aspire to. So the second key has to do with the emotional nature. The third key, patience sweet, has to do with our lower nature. Our lower nature, our lower mind. Our lower mind cannot really see. All our mind can do is to be patient when things happen. Because we are going to see that the next key has to do with our higher mind that really sees things. But at this point, what the disciple is developing is this sense of surrender, of patience, of knowing that everything happens the way it has to happen. So it's trying to develop a sense of patience. And this is a war at the mental level between the call of the lower ego and the call of the higher ego in the theosophical view. The fight between our aspirations, spiritual aspirations, and our lower needs and desires and attachments. So this is like a stage also where we have to challenge the thing that we are most identified with, which is our psychological self. This is why I think it says the daring is necessary. Because we can work, try to control our body, we can try to control our emotions, but we can still be identified with our psychological self and say, look how great I am, I control perfectly my emotions, my body. Now we are challenging that very sense of being the personality. And that's a subtle battle, much more subtle battle than fighting with the emotions or the physical actions. So once the person has passed that portal, comes the next one, the fourth one, which is viraga, V-I-R-A-G-A, which means the absence of conditioning. Raga means color, when we have a colored view, or color as to the emotions also, and V is without. So this is a state of equanimity, and is defined in the Voice of the Silence as indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived. So the voice of the silence says, now for the fourth prepare, the portal of temptations which do snare the inner man. So far we were working on what is external to us. Even the psychological self is external to our pure sense of being. Mind, emotions, body are external. But now the work is on that very sense of pure being, which is more internal. That's the inner, as it's defined here, the inner man or the inner person. And it says, before thine hand is lifted to upraise the fourth gate's latch, thou must have mastered all mental changes in thyself and slay the army of the thought sensations, that subtle and insidious creep unasked within the soul's bright shrine. O fearless aspirant, look deep within the well of thine own heart and answer. Knowest thou of the self-powers? O thou perceiver of external shadows? If thou dost not, then art thou lost. For on the path forth, the lightest breeze of passion or desire will stir the steady light upon the pure white walls of the soul. For know that the eternal knows no change. So this now has nothing to do with external actions. The how to act externally was solved in the previous stage, in all the previous stages. Now this has to do with the perception of the pure self, which implies to transcend thoughts, to transcend the idea of the thinker. So when you see the description of this stage, it has to do with exactly with this, with being able to perceive the real self. Do you know the powers of the self? Because if you don't, you are not going to be able to go through this gate. This now has nothing to do with purifying, with controlling, with nothing like that. This has to do purely with the perception of what we really are, which is now possible because the lower nature was mastered to a good, a large extent. So when the person tries to perceive who he or she really is, the lower nature is not in the way. That person is not the slave of desires and thoughts and physical needs or sensations. To be able to perceive the real self in a very deep way, because we always can perceive our real self. But this is talking about perceiving the real self in a very deep way. We can perceive our real self at any level that our consciousness is, because the real self is always there. But we see a reflection of the real self. So at this point, the need is to perceive the real self in a very deep way. And for that, the lower nature has to be completely calm, not because the person has imposed a sense of calmness, but because the lower nature is already in order, is not producing disturbances by itself. So that's the fourth portal. And once the person, and that's the last step where there is any kind of struggle. After this gate, there are more things to perceive, deeper things to realize, but they are not related to any kind of struggle. The struggle ends here. So it is said, the dreary task is done, thy labor well nigh over. The wide abyss that gaped to swallow thee is almost penned. Thou hast now crossed the moat that circles round the gate of human passions. Thou hast now conquered Mara, which is like the tempter in Buddhism, and his furious host. Thou hast removed pollution from thine heart and bled it from impure desire. But, O thou glorious combatant, thy task is not yet done. Protect thy mind from pride and satisfaction at thoughts of the great feat achieved. A sense of pride would mar the work. May hard thy soul against the snares of self. Remember that these stages can be lost. It is said that up to the fourth initiation, the person still can fall and can lose the perception, because, as we said, this, along with that perception, there is a lot of stirring in the lower nature. And it is only when the fourth initiation is passed that the lower nature is completely in order and that perception cannot be lost. At this point, a subtle sense of pride, because remember also that this pride, this fear, all the things that are said here are not necessarily the same that we know by those names. It's the same with love. We experience certain dimension of love, which is not the same as the impersonal love that an enlightened being feels. So again here, this person is of course beyond any grosser sense of pride or evident sense of pride. But there are subtle senses of pride and fear that are still there. So the voice of the silence says, when thou hast reached that state, the portals that thou hast to conquer on the path fling open wide. They are gates to let thee pass, and nature's strongest mights possess no power to stay thy course. Thou wilt be master of the sevenfold path, but not till then, O candidate for trials passing speech. So the idea is that there are more things to do, but these trials do not involve the struggle and the dangers that we were talking about, because at this point when the real self is perceived, then illusion is vanished. Now the stages that are left are a question of deepening that perception, of maturing that perception of the real. And that may take a lot of work in a sense, but not in the same way with struggle or doubt or fear or possibility of falling back. So the voice of the silence doesn't describe much the next stages because they are very high, and also, as I said, the fragment is more focused on the dangers that we have to be warned about, and not so much describing the accomplishments. You know, the accomplishments on these levels cannot be really understood for us. If we say there is a sense of happiness, we may think that happiness is referring to our sense of happiness, which is usually excitement. So if a person thinks that that excitement has to go on all the way through because that is the ultimate aim of the spiritual life, that may become a serious obstacle. Because the wise person is always defined as a person that is beyond happiness and sorrow, beyond pleasure and suffering. So these kind of writings don't talk much about the accomplishments or the states that you can reach. It talks about the dangers, so you are warned to a certain extent because we only know them when we have to face them. But it gives a sense of perspective. So just to finish the idea of the 7 keys, the next key is virya. Virya is defined as the dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth out of the mire of lies terrestrial. Then we have dhyana, which means meditation, whose golden gate, once opened, leads the adept toward the realm of Sat, the self, eternal, and its ceaseless contemplation. This dhyana is not the meditation that we practice. It's a constant state of a constant contemplation of the real self in whatever the person does. And finally, prajna, which means wisdom, the key to which makes of man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the dhyanis. Dhyanis are like spiritual gods. So this is more or less what the third fragment is about. It describes some stages which, although they refer to the path of initiation, we can see them reflected in different levels of our lives. But I think it's very important to have this view because it gives a perspective. You know, if, for example, we live in the world and we don't know that there are many countries that probably we will never visit, and many cultures, and we think that the world is only what we are, what we have in our neighborhood, that produces a very narrow view of life or the world, and that brings its own limitations. So knowing about the world, even if we are not going to be in those countries, is something that is necessary. Or this example of how many lives are necessary or how deep the realization of the self is also gives us a perception that we cannot expect that because we wake up or get up every morning and meditate 15 minutes and do yoga, we are going to be enlightened. This gives us also a perspective. So I think those are some of the aims of this kind of text and why they were published. That's more or less what I wanted to share. Is there any comment or question?
You mentioned 7 lives and there's 7 portals. Is it 1 life per portal or?
No.
Sorry.
No. That's a natural question. This, according to Leadbeater, for example, the 7 lives is an average, but the whole path can be gone through in 2 lives. He said, I know people that have done that. He said, or can be, can take longer, but it's like if you were to ask me how long does a human being live. So we would say, well, normally in modern countries, 80 years old, but many reach 90 and some die, much younger. So it's just to give us an idea, a general idea about what is to be expected. And these portals are not necessarily connected with the initiations, because these 7 portals embrace the initiations from the 1st to the 4th, and there are higher initiations later. So I don't think the portals are necessarily related to the lives. Usually the first portals are easier, and a person can go through them even in 1 life, but then what comes later is harder, to realize. The deeper you go, the harder it is to realize the truth, so they take longer. But I wouldn't relate the portals with the lives.
When the person goes on that path, and then there's 7 lives after that, every time when they, I guess there's 2 questions, do they get to know all of the reincarnations? Because you have to reach a certain point in order to know who you have been when you're still here on Earth, all your lives. And then every time when you're reborn, let's say it takes 7 lives, every time when you're reborn, do you remember, did you make that choice? and this is what you have to work, or it just all works on subconscious level, your higher self?
No, there at some of the initiations, the person has already the ability to perceive all the previous lives if the person wants to. But at that point, most spiritual people don't care much about the previous lives. We see our previous lives, it is said in the theosophical literature, sometimes after we die, at certain point of our evolution, but the memory of that is not necessary. It's like a person that lives in the present. You know, the spiritual life is said we have to learn to live in the present and let go of the past. So a spiritual person is not constantly going back to what he was or he did or what happened in the past. He could do it if he wants to, if it is necessary, if he's dealing with something and wants to have a view of how that develops during his life to try to understand. So it is available there. But usually the person doesn't think about the past or the future. He's concentrated on the present. So I guess the same happens with a spiritual person. Although at certain point, the knowledge of the previous lives is available. Usually in the literature that we have in the TS, there is not a lot of emphasis on, knowing the previous lives.
Well, I can say for the first time that I disagree with you on that. Because I think it's important, everything in our life, we go through karma. So whatever we do in this life has a lot to do, and people we meet in this life has a lot to do with their previous doings, and good or bad. And I think it's important, not out of the curiosity, but things would make a whole lot of more sense why this is happening, and whether a person is upset and doesn't know why it's happening, but does understand there is a reason for it. And when you exactly know, it's like if you're driving somewhere, you know you're driving somewhere, but it's better to know whether you're driving south or north or east and west, and you know your destination. You know the reason and the steps why this is happening. You understand, and you get a sense of feeling what might come next in your life, in this life or the next life. And like I said, it's not because of the curiosity, it's because everything we do, even sitting here right now, has something to do with our previous doings and lives, and what we'll do tomorrow, we don't know. We know what we did yesterday, and whatever we plan to do tomorrow will help us when we wake up. We will know that this is what our plan was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. At the same time, there is a state, because all those things belong to our mind, that needs to know all those things, which is true, and we all, share that. But there is a point where the person knows that everything that happens has a reason, and really doesn't make any sense. I mean, the person doesn't need any explanation. If I have a difficult relationship with a person, I'm not talking about me personally. Let's suppose a spiritual person. I don't need to know why this happened. I don't care. I know that this difficult relationship has a past. There is no doubt about it. But the main concern is to see, okay, how can I deal with this? What can I learn from me? From my reactions? Where do I have difficulties? How can I learn to relate to a person? So that's what I mean, that consciousness is so much focused on the present and doesn't need explanations. Maybe the person would go and see, I don't know. But I know that there is a stage in life where our mind stops asking questions in that sense, stops looking for justifications, or stops planning ahead. There is a poise that says everything is fine. I don't need, reassurance of anything. So just let me concentrate on what I have to do now. So I guess it depends on the level, of development of the person when that is important or not. But I understand that in many cases, for many people that could be important.